Most people think anxiety is something they'll deal with later, after life slows down, after stress reduces, after things finally feel more stable. But anxiety doesn't wait. It quietly settles in while you're busy surviving, while you're handling responsibilities, while you're telling yourself you'll fix it one day. The longer your brain stays in threat mode, the more it treats anxiety as normal. At first, it's just tension, then constant alertness, then a mind that never fully relaxes, even in safe moments. And once something feels normal, it becomes automatic. You stop questioning the racing thoughts. You stop noticing how tense your body is. You start believing this is just how your mind works. That's the danger. Because anxiety doesn't usually explode. It quietly shapes your habits, your decisions, your limits. You avoid things without realizing why. You hesitate even when nothing is wrong. You live carefully instead of freely. This audiobook is an interruption. Not later. Not after burnout. Not after anxiety becomes your identity. Now. Because if you don't learn how your brain creates anxiety, your brain will keep doing it for you again and again in the background. Understanding this process is what stops it from hardening into a permanent state. If you're done letting fear quietly run your life, like the video, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, and share this before someone else accepts anxiety as the way they're supposed to live. Chapter 1. The alarm that won't turn off anxiety is not a mystery. It is not a curse. It is not proof that you're broken. Anxiety is an alarm system doing exactly what it was designed to do: detect danger and move you to safety. The problem is that your alarm has started to treat everyday life like a burning building. A text message feels like a threat. A meeting feels like a lion. A quiet moment feels like a trap. And because the alarm is loud, your body obeys. Picture a smoke detector in a kitchen. It's there to save you. But when it's too sensitive, it screams every time you make toast. The sound is unbearable, so you wave a towel, open windows, maybe even yank the battery out. That's what most people do with anxiety. They wave towels, they open windows, they numb, they distract, they avoid, they chase reassurance. And sometimes they rip out the battery with alcohol, overeating, endless scrolling, or overworking. It gets quiet for a moment, but the underlying problem remains. The detector is still too sensitive, and the kitchen is still where you live. Your brain has the same kind of detector. It's ancient, it's powerful, and it's biased toward survival, not happiness. Long before there were offices, inboxes, and social media, there were predators, hunger, and exile. The brain learned a rule. It is better to overreact to a shadow than to ignore a real threat. If you jump at a branch that looks like a snake, you waste a little energy. If you ignore a snake, you might not get another chance. That survival rule still runs in you today. Anxiety is your brain choosing false alarms over missed alarms. Here, the first disciplined truth: anxiety is not the enemy. Your relationship to it is the enemy. When you treat anxiety like a monster, you feed it with fear and resistance. When you treat it like a signal, you can retrain the system. Let me tell you about a man named Rohan. He wasn't weak. He wasn't lazy. He was reliable, the one everyone counted on. But every morning, the moment he opened his eyes, his chest tightened. His mind sprinted ahead. What if I fail today? What if I say something stupid? What if my heart can't handle this feeling? The feeling was so intense that he started building his life around not feeling it. He avoided presentations. He canceled plans. He kept his world small because small felt safer. One day on a drive home, he heard his car make a strange sound. His stomach dropped. His mind instantly created a disaster movie. The engine failing, the car spinning, a crash, humiliation, bills, danger. He pulled over, heart pounding, hands trembling. Then he noticed the sound stopped when he released the brakes. It was a loose piece near the pedal, a minor issue, but his body had already gone to war. That's anxiety in one scene. The sound was neutral. The brain wrote a threat story. The body obeyed the story as if it were fact. And because the body felt terror, the mind concluded there must be danger. This loop is the engine of anxiety. To stop it, you must understand how your brain builds it. Your brain is not one unified voice. It is a team of systems, each with a job. One system scans for danger and reacts fast. Another system thinks, plans, and evaluates. When the danger system fires, it dumps stress chemicals into your body, speeds your heart, tightens muscles, sharpens attention, and prepares you to fight, run, or freeze. This is not imagination. It is biology. Your body becomes a survival machine. But here's the trap. The fast danger system does not speak in sentences. It speaks in sensations. Tight chest, hot face, shaky hands. A jolt in the stomach. And then the thinking system tries to explain those sensations. It looks for a reason. It lands on whatever it can find, a meeting, a memory, a headline, a relationship, your health. It labels the feeling as proof. Something is wrong, something bad is coming. This is why anxiety can feel so convincing. Your body is presenting evidence. Your mind is interpreting it. Together they build certainty out of a false alarm. Now consider a different metaphor. Imagine your brain as a security guard at a museum. The guard's job is to protect priceless art. If there's a rumor of danger, the guard can lock the doors. But if the guard is inexperienced, exhausted, or traumatized, they might lock the doors every time someone coughs. The museum can't function. Visitors stop coming. The guard feels even more responsible, so they lock down harder. That's how anxiety narrows a life. The brain tries to keep you safe by keeping you small. So what makes the guard jumpy? Stress, sleep deprivation, caffeine overload, constant uncertainty, past experiences that taught the brain danger can come out of nowhere. When life becomes unpredictable, the brain becomes controlling. It starts preparing for pain because it believes preparation will prevent it. But preparation in anxiety often means rumination and avoidance. And those two habits teach the brain the worst lesson possible. You can't handle discomfort. Every time you avoid an anxious situation, you get short-term relief. Your nervous system relaxes for a moment. Your brain marks the avoidance as a success. Good job, you escaped. And that reward trains the brain to do it again. The next time the alarm rings faster and louder because now the brain has data. Last time we ran and it worked. Avoidance becomes a leash. Your world shrinks and the anxiety grows, not because you're weak, but because your brain learns through repetition. The path out starts with a new skill, separating sensation from story. Sensation is the raw physical experience in your body. Story is the interpretation your mind adds. Anxiety blends them until you can't tell the difference. Your first job is to split them apart. When the alarm hits, you name the sensation with precision. Not I'm freaking out, but my heart is fast, my throat is tight, my stomach is fluttering, my shoulders are tense. Then you name the story. My mind is saying I'm in danger. My mind is predicting embarrassment. My mind is forecasting failure. You are not denying it. You are observing it. Observation creates distance. Distance creates choice. Rohan practiced this in the simplest setting, the moment he felt the morning surge. Instead of grabbing his phone to distract himself, he sat up and put his feet on the floor. He felt the sensations and labeled them. Then he reminded himself, "This is my alarm system. It's loud, not accurate." Some mornings it calmed quickly. Other mornings it stayed. But something changed. He stopped begging it to leave. He stopped treating it like a crisis. And because he stopped treating it like a crisis, the brain slowly stopped treating it like one too. In the middle of all this, remember a key principle. Your brain takes your reactions as instructions. Panic tells it this is an emergency. Curiosity tells it this is uncomfortable but safe. Avoidance tells it this is too much for you. Engagement tells it you can handle it. Your brain is always listening to what you do next. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. Now we move from understanding to action. Not motivational fluff, not wishful thinking, concrete training. The first action is to stop negotiating with the alarm. When anxiety rises, most people start bargaining. "Please go away. What if it gets worse? I can't feel this." That negotiation signals danger. Instead, you practice allowance. You say, "Okay, there's the alarm." You breathe normally, not dramatically. You loosen your jaw. You drop your shoulders. You let the sensations be present while you keep moving with your day. This is how you teach the brain. The alarm can ring and I can still function. The second action is to stop checking for certainty. Anxiety craves guarantees. It will ask for reassurance like a starving animal. Are you sure you're okay? Are you sure you won't fail? Are you sure your body is fine? The more you feed that animal with constant checking, the hungrier it gets. So you practice a harder skill, living with reasonable uncertainty. You tell yourself, "I don't get a 100% guarantee. I get a 100% commitment to respond well." That is maturity. That is discipline. The third action is to regulate your baseline like it matters, because it does. A sensitive alarm becomes even more sensitive when your nervous system is depleted. Sleep is not a luxury when you're retraining anxiety. It's a foundation. Movement is not optional. It's a signal to the body that you are capable and alive. Hydration and steady meals stabilize the physical sensations that the anxious brain misinterprets as danger. Stimulants like excessive caffeine can turn a mild worry into a full-body emergency. You don't have to become a monk. You do have to stop acting surprised when you pour gasoline on your nervous system and it catches fire. And now the deepest shift. Anxiety often isn't just fear of danger. It's fear of feeling. The brain says, "If I feel this, I will collapse." So your goal becomes proving through experience that you can feel discomfort without being destroyed by it. That is resilience. Not the absence of anxiety, but the presence of capacity. Rohan tested this with a small challenge. He chose one avoided situation, speaking up once in a meeting. He didn't wait to feel confident. He planned to feel anxious and do it anyway. When the moment came, his heart raced. His hands were warm. His mind screamed, "Don't." He spoke anyway, briefly. Nothing exploded. No one laughed. The meeting moved on. His body settled minutes later. And something critical happened in his brain. New evidence. That's how you rewire the alarm system. Not by thinking your way out, but by living your way through. As you finish this chapter, let the message land hard. Anxiety is a process, not a personality trait. It is a trainable response. Your brain learned it, and your brain can unlearn it, but it will not unlearn it through avoidance, argument, or endless analysis. It unlearns through new experiences repeated until they become normal. So ask yourself, quietly but honestly, when the alarm rings, do you treat it like a signal or like a verdict? What do you usually do in the first 30 seconds after anxiety appears? And what does that teach your brain? If you stopped chasing certainty and started building capacity, what would you attempt this week that you've been avoiding? And if your anxiety is an overprotective guard, what would it look like to train it with firmness, patience, and proof instead of fear? Chapter 2. The Prediction Machine. Last chapter, you saw anxiety for what it is, an alarm that can be loud without being accurate, a security guard that locks the doors too easily. You learned how sensations become stories, and how your brain takes your next move as an instruction. Now we go one level deeper, because once you understand what the brain is actually doing in real time, you stop arguing with anxiety and start retraining the machinery that creates it. Your brain is not designed to wait for reality to happen and then respond. It predicts. It guesses what comes next, then prepares your body in advance. That is the brain's superpower, and it's also the reason anxiety feels like it appears out of nowhere. You walk into a room, and before anyone says a word, your chest tightens. You open an email, and before you read the first line, your stomach drops. You're not reacting to what is happening. You're reacting to what your brain predicts might happen. Think of your brain like a weather system. It gathers signals and generates a forecast. If the forecast says storm, your body starts closing shutters and bracing for impact. The forecast is not the weather. But if you trust the forecast more than the sky outside your window, you'll live as if storms are constant. This forecasting is powered by fast, ancient circuitry that prioritizes threat. A part of the brain acts like a smoke detector, sensitive to anything that resembles past danger. Another part acts like a historian, storing emotional memories and attaching meaning to them. Another part acts like a planner, trying to reason, manage, and control. Anxiety happens when the threat detector sends an urgent message. The historian supplies a frightening context, and the planner starts spinning strategies to prevent pain. The body then becomes the stage where those systems perform. This is why anxiety loves patterns. If you once felt trapped in a crowded bus and panicked, the brain might flag buses as danger forever. If you once made a mistake and felt humiliated, the brain might flag speaking up as danger. It doesn't matter that the current situation is different. The brain doesn't want accurate. It wants safe. It chooses speed over nuance. A woman named Mira lived with this speed. She wasn't afraid of public speaking because she lacked skill. She was afraid because her brain had stitched together a memory. Standing in front of a classroom as a teenager, feeling her face heat up, hearing a few laughs, and walking back to her seat believing she was exposed. Years later, she had a job that demanded presentation after presentation. Every time she prepared, she did what anxious minds do. She overprepared, she rehearsed obsessively, she tried to create perfection as a shield. And on the day of the presentation, her body still reacted as if she were that teenager again. She assumed the fear meant she wasn't built for leadership. But the fear wasn't a verdict. It was a prediction. Her brain had decided if you speak, you will be exposed. And it pushed that prediction into her body as heat, tension, and breathlessness so she would take it seriously. The brain learns predictions through repetition, and through what you do when the alarm rings. If you escape, the brain logs it as confirmation. If you stay and survive, the brain logs a new data point. This is where most people get stuck. They try to think their way to calm, but the prediction system doesn't change through debate. It changes through corrected forecasts, again and again, until the brain stops expecting disaster. The key mechanism is something simple and brutal. Your brain updates when it meets surprise. When you predict catastrophe and then meet normal, that mismatch is what rewires you. But if you avoid the situation, your brain never gets the mismatch. It never learns. It just keeps predicting. This is why reassurance is such a tricky drug. It feels like medicine. It lowers your anxiety quickly. But it often teaches the brain you were in danger and someone rescued you. The alarm learns to ring louder next time because it believes rescue is needed. Reassurance becomes a crutch that quietly weakens the ankle. So what do you do instead? You train prediction error on purpose. You create experiences where your anxious brain expects pain, but you stay long enough to discover reality. Not heroic, not reckless, measured, repeatable. A training plan, not a drama. Mira started with a smaller arena than the big presentations. She stopped trying to erase anxiety and started trying to lead while feeling it. She chose one meeting each week where she would speak for 30 seconds, even if her voice shook. She did not wait for confidence. She did not force calm. She practiced being present with sensation and still contributing. At first, her body reacted like a fire drill, but she stayed, she spoke. The meeting continued, people nodded. The sky didn't fall. Her brain began to collect new evidence. But there was another layer to her anxiety. Her body sensations themselves had become a threat. The heat in her face felt like exposure. The tightness in her chest felt like collapse. The shakiness felt like failure. She wasn't just afraid of speaking. She was afraid of what anxiety felt like while speaking. This is where you learn a powerful concept: interoception. It's your brain's ability to sense what's happening inside your body. The anxious brain becomes hyper-aware of internal signals and then interprets them as danger. A normal heart rate increase becomes a warning. A normal adrenaline surge becomes a catastrophe. And because you fear the sensations, you monitor them constantly, which makes them louder, which makes you fear them more. It's like turning your microphone up and then being shocked at the feedback. So you must retrain two things at once: the fear of the situation and the fear of the sensation. One way to do that is to stop treating sensations as enemies and start treating them as training weights. When your heart races, you don't ask, "How do I stop this?" You ask, "Can I allow this and stay here?" When your stomach flips, you don't chase relief, you practice steadiness. You are building capacity, not comfort. A practical exercise: when you feel anxiety, identify where it is in your body, then soften the surrounding muscles. If it's in your chest, relax the shoulders and jaw. If it's in your stomach, loosen the belly. Not to make anxiety vanish, but to stop adding tension on top of tension. Then take a normal breath, not a dramatic one. A dramatic breath signals emergency. A normal breath signals, "I'm safe enough to function." Then you do the most important move. You keep your behavior aligned with your values, not your fear. Anxiety will beg you to shrink. You refuse calmly. You move forward in a controlled way. That controlled forward movement is the language your brain understands. Now, let's talk about the planner in your mind, the part that tries to solve anxiety by thinking. It means well, but it often becomes fuel. It runs scenarios, rehearses conversations, scans for mistakes, and predicts outcomes. This rumination feels productive, but it's often just worry in a suit. You need a rule: planning is allowed, rumination is not. Planning produces actions. Rumination produces tension. Here is how you tell the difference. If your thinking ends with a clear next step, it's planning. If it loops without resolution, it's rumination. If it pulls you deeper into helplessness, it's rumination. If it keeps returning to the same fear with new angles, it's rumination. When you catch rumination, you don't negotiate with it. You redirect your attention to something concrete in the present moment, then take an action that matches your priorities. Not because you feel ready, but because your brain needs proof that you can lead yourself. A man named Vikram practiced this with health anxiety. One sensation in his body would trigger a spiral. He would scan symptoms online, check his pulse, ask others for reassurance, and replay every past story he had heard about illness. The more he checked, the more convinced he became something was wrong. His body stayed on high alert, creating more sensations, creating more worry, creating more checking. He didn't need more information. He needed a new relationship with uncertainty. So he created a boundary. He set a short daily window for health-related thinking, and outside that window, no checking. When anxiety flared at 10 p.m., he would say to himself, "Not now, tomorrow," during the window. Then he would do something physical and grounded: a slow walk, a shower, a simple stretch, a glass of water, then bed. The first nights were hard. His brain screamed that he was being irresponsible, but after a few weeks his system began to settle. He wasn't ignoring reality. He was refusing compulsive control. This is disciplined living, not letting fear dictate your rituals. Now here is the part many people miss. Your brain's alarm system is influenced by your baseline state. If you live with chronic stress, poor sleep, erratic eating, and constant stimulation, your nervous system is already close to the edge. In that state, tiny things feel like threats because your body has no buffer. Your goal is not to become perfect. Your goal is to become stable. Stability gives your brain fewer reasons to predict danger. So you build a simple routine that signals safety. Consistent sleep and wake times as much as possible. Daily movement that elevates your heart rate and then brings it back down, teaching your body that arousal can end. Regular meals that prevent blood sugar crashes from masquerading as panic. A deliberate reduction in stimulant overload if you know it spikes your body. Short periods of quiet each day where you teach your system that stillness is not a trap. And you do something else that changes everything. You stop treating anxiety as a personal failure. You treat it as a pattern your brain learned. Patterns can be rewritten, but they are rewritten by repetition, not by inspiration. Mira's turning point wasn't the day she felt calm. It was the day she stood in front of a room, felt her heart race, and continued anyway without apologizing for her physiology. She spoke slower. She grounded her feet. She let her body do what bodies do under stress. And when it ended, she didn't debrief for 2 hours analyzing every expression in the audience. She went for a walk, ate lunch, and moved on. That was not indifference. That was leadership. Because leadership is not the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear run the schedule. As you move into the rest of this audiobook, you are going to build a new identity. Someone who can feel intense sensations and still choose their next step. Someone who can hear the alarm and keep living. Someone who no longer needs perfect certainty to act with strength. Now take a quiet moment to reflect as the chapter closes. What does your brain most often predict? And how does your body react as if that prediction is already true? Where have you been chasing reassurance that gives quick relief but trains a louder alarm later? What is one situation you've avoided that, if approached gradually and repeatedly, could give your brain the surprise it needs to update? And if you stopped trying to win an argument with anxiety and started training your prediction machine with proof, what would you do differently this week, even with a racing heart? If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Chapter 3. The safety habits that keep you stuck. You've already seen that anxiety is an overactive alarm, and that your brain predicts danger before it arrives, pushing those predictions into your body as urgency. You've also begun shifting from fighting the feeling to training the system through real-world proof. Now it's time to expose the quiet behaviors that look like protection but secretly keep the alarm sensitive. Anxiety doesn't only live in your thoughts and sensations. It lives in your habits. Specifically, it lives in the tiny, just-in-case, moves you make all day long. These moves are so normal you barely notice them, but your brain notices. It records them as evidence that danger is real. Imagine you wear a heavy jacket every time you step outside, even on warm days, because you're afraid it might get cold. You feel relief because you're prepared, but your body never learns what the weather is actually like. Over time, you become more sensitive to any breeze, more convinced that cold is unbearable, more dependent on the jacket. Anxiety works the same way. The jacket is what psychologists often call safety behavior, the little ritual you do to feel protected. The ritual isn't the problem because it's morally wrong. The ritual is the problem because it trains your brain to believe you needed it. A man named Samir did this without realizing it. His anxiety centered around work conversations. Before every meeting, he would rehearse what he planned to say, not once but repeatedly, like polishing the same coin until it thinned. He'd check his notes again and again. He'd open his laptop early to scan the agenda. He'd arrive 10 minutes early to pick a seat where he felt less visible. Then during the meeting, he'd speak quickly, over-explain, and end with, "Does that make sense?" just to pull reassurance from the room. He thought these were signs of professionalism. They were actually signs of fear management, and they worked in the short term. The meeting would end and he would exhale, believing the rituals had saved him, but the cost came later. His brain learned, if you don't rehearse, you're not safe. If you don't over-explain, you'll be attacked. If you don't get reassurance, something is wrong. The next meeting felt even heavier. The rituals grew. The confidence shrank. This is the harsh paradox. Safety behaviors reduce anxiety today and increase anxiety tomorrow. Your brain is simple in one way. It learns by association. When you do a safety ritual and the feared outcome doesn't happen, your brain doesn't conclude, "See, you're safe." It often concludes, "See, the ritual worked." That conclusion is invisible, but it becomes a rule, and rules become prisons. Safety behaviors can look like 100 different things. You avoid eye contact. You carry a bottle of water just in case you panic. You keep your phone in your hand so you can escape into it. You Google symptoms to feel certain. You ask someone to confirm you're okay. You map exit routes. You keep your schedule packed so you don't have to sit with your mind. You delay tasks until the last second so you can blame the rush instead of confronting the fear of not being perfect. You don't show up as yourself. You show up as a strategy. Some safety behaviors are obvious, like leaving a situation. Others are subtle, like trying to control how you're perceived. And subtle ones can be the most sticky because you can disguise them as personality. I'm just thorough. I'm just careful. I'm just private. Sometimes you are. But sometimes it's fear dressed in respectable clothing. Here, the disciplined shift. Your goal is not to feel safe. Your goal is to become safe to yourself. That means you build trust with your own nervous system by proving you can handle discomfort without rituals, without running, without needing the world to cooperate. This is where you train what I'll call clean exposure. Clean exposure means you face the situation while dropping the crutches that falsely promise safety. If you keep the crutches, you never learn you can walk. Samir started with one simple change. In meetings, he stopped ending every comment with a reassurance-seeking question. He made a statement, then paused. His mind screamed that silence would expose him. His body surged, but he stayed. People responded normally. The urge to grab reassurance rose and fell like a wave, and after a few minutes it lost strength. That wave pattern matters. Anxiety peaks, then it shifts. The problem is that most people escape at the peak, so they never learn that it would have shifted on its own. When you stay long enough to feel the rise and the fall, your brain learns a new rule: discomfort moves. I can survive it. I don't need rituals to make it stop. Let's make this practical in a way you can actually apply. First, identify your top 3 safety behaviors. Not 10, not everything. The top 3 that you use most often. The ones you reach for automatically. These are the behaviors that keep your alarm sensitive. Second, choose one behavior to reduce, not all at once. You're not proving toughness. You're building learning. If you try to drop everything, you'll flood your system, then you'll retreat, and the retreat will teach the brain the wrong lesson. Third, design a controlled challenge where you will face a situation and purposely do less of the safety ritual. Not none, less. If you normally check your phone every minute in a social setting, you keep it in your pocket for 5 minutes. If you normally rehearse your words 10 times, you rehearse twice. If you normally sit near the exit, you sit 1 row farther in. If you normally ask for reassurance, you delay it by 10 minutes. This is not random. This is training. You're teaching the brain through evidence. Aisha learned this with panic sensations in public places. She didn't avoid everything, but she was always scanning. She chose seats near exits, kept mints in her bag, carried a water bottle, and constantly checked how she felt. She believed she was being prepared. In reality, she was telling her brain, panic is dangerous and must be managed. Her breakthrough started when she stopped checking her body every few seconds. She picked a simple task: stand in a line at a store for 5 minutes without scanning her heart rate, without searching for signs, without gripping her water bottle as a shield. The first attempt was rough. Her mind threw threats like stones, but she held her place in line anyway. She let her hands be free. She looked outward instead of inward. She practiced being a person in a store, not a patient monitoring symptoms. That outward shift is powerful. Anxiety narrows attention inward and forward into imagined disasters. Training expands attention outward into the real world right now. When you do that, you don't become careless. You become present. Now, there is a deeper reason safety behaviors keep anxiety alive. They prevent what your brain needs most: corrective meaning. If you enter a situation and you survive, but your brain believes you survived only because you performed a ritual, the situation remains coded as dangerous. The fear stays in the file. Clean exposure rewrites the file. It tells the brain, I can be here without the ritual. The danger label begins to fade. You'll notice something else as you drop safety behaviors. Your anxiety may spike at first. That spike is not failure. It is the alarm protesting the loss of its old system. The brain prefers familiar suffering over unfamiliar freedom. When you stop feeding the ritual, the alarm tries to get your attention with volume. Your job is to respond with steadiness, not drama. You keep your behavior consistent. You continue with your day. And then, slowly, the protest weakens. There's a specific trap to watch for here: swapping one safety behavior for another. People drop one ritual and replace it with a new one without noticing. They stop asking a friend for reassurance but start reassuring themselves with mental checking. They stop leaving the room but start clenching their muscles. They stop rehearsing out loud but rehearse in their head for hours. The brain doesn't care what the ritual is. It cares that you're still treating anxiety as a threat that must be controlled. So you adopt one uncompromising rule. When anxiety rises, you choose one grounding action that is not a ritual. A ritual is done to eliminate anxiety. A grounding action is done to keep you connected while anxiety exists. Grounding actions are simple. Feel your feet on the ground, relax your jaw, let your shoulders drop, place your attention on what you can see and hear in the room. Move at a normal pace, speak at a steady pace, keep your hands unclenched, keep your breath ordinary. You are not trying to win a battle. You are showing your brain that you can function. Samir also discovered a second layer: perfectionism as a safety behavior. He used flawless performance to avoid the pain of being judged. So he practiced good enough on purpose. He sent an email that was clear but not polished for an hour. He spoke in a meeting without giving 3 disclaimers. He allowed a small imperfection to exist. That was terrifying at first, but it taught him something deeper than confidence. He could tolerate being human. That's what this chapter is about. Tolerance, capacity, clean learning. Anxiety shrinks when you stop proving that you need protection. It shrinks when you become the person who can handle discomfort without rituals, without constant checking, without needing the world to confirm you're safe. As you step forward from here, keep your focus on one measurable shift, not a complete personality overhaul, one targeted training choice, one safety behavior reduced, one moment of staying present while your alarm complains. And now let the ending land in your mind like a challenge you can't unhear. Which safety behavior do you defend as necessary, even though it might be the very thing keeping the alarm sensitive? When anxiety rises, what ritual do you reach for first? And what would happen if you delayed it long enough to feel the wave peak and fall? If you trained clean exposure in one small situation this week, what would you do? And which crutch would you drop so your brain can finally learn the truth? If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. Chapter 4. Training your nervous system to stay steady. Up to now, you've been learning to see anxiety clearly. An alarm that can misfire, a prediction machine that mistakes possibility for certainty, and a set of safety habits that keep the system jumpy. You've started shifting from fighting anxiety to teaching your brain through proof, staying present long enough for the wave to rise and fall. In this chapter, you're going to strengthen the foundation underneath all of that, because the brain that creates anxiety is inseparable from the body that carries it. Most people try to solve anxiety as if it's only a thinking problem. They look for the perfect insight, the perfect explanation, the perfect sentence that will quiet the mind. But anxiety is also a state. It's your nervous system set to high sensitivity, like a sound system with the volume turned up and the microphone too close to the speaker. When your baseline is keyed up, ordinary stimulation becomes overwhelming. That's why a small inconvenience can feel like a crisis, and a normal sensation can feel like danger. This isn't about becoming calm all the time. Calm is not the goal. Steadiness is the goal. Steadiness means your system can activate when needed and come back down afterward. A resilient nervous system has range. It can turn on and turn off. Anxiety is often the loss of that range, where the system turns on too easily and struggles to power down. Think of a guard dog that was trained to bark at intruders. That's useful. But if the dog barks at every passing car, every neighbor, every leaf, the household becomes exhausted. The dog isn't evil. The dog is overconditioned and under-recovered. Your nervous system works similarly. If your days are packed with pressure, your nights are short, your attention is constantly pulled, and your body is underfed, overstimulated, and underrested, your internal guard dog is going to bark at everything. So the question becomes, how do you train your nervous system to come back down without turning your life into a fragile bubble? You do it by practicing regulation while you live, not by waiting for perfect conditions. Regulation is not a magic trick you do when you're panicking. Regulation is a lifestyle signal you send repeatedly, so your system learns I can be activated and still be safe. I can be uncomfortable and still be okay. I can feel intensity and still remain in control of my choices. One of the most important ideas to understand is that your nervous system learns through rhythm. It responds to patterns, sleep and wake cycles, movement and stillness, stimulation and quiet, effort and recovery. When those rhythms are chaotic, your system becomes reactive. When those rhythms are stable, your system becomes more flexible. A man named Arjun discovered this the hard way. He didn't consider himself anxious. He considered himself driven. He would wake up and reach for his phone immediately. He'd drink strong coffee on an empty stomach. He'd skip breakfast, sprint into work, sit for hours, then crash at night with more scrolling. In between, he was constantly checking messages, constantly switching tasks, constantly feeling behind. When anxiety began hitting him in the afternoons, he assumed something was wrong with his mind. Nothing was wrong with his mind. His body had been living in constant activation, and his brain was interpreting that activation as threat. His baseline was a storm. By afternoon, one extra stressor pushed him over the edge. He didn't fix it by trying to think positive. He fixed it by training his nervous system like an athlete trains their conditioning. He started with 2 changes. First, he stopped treating mornings like an emergency. For the first 10 minutes after waking, no phone. He let his system come online gradually. Second, he anchored his day with movement, not intensity but consistency. A walk after lunch. Light strength work a few times a week. The point was not performance. The point was teaching his body a reliable cycle, up and down, effort and recovery. Here is why movement matters so much for anxiety. Anxiety is often trapped activation. Your body prepares to act, but you don't discharge that energy. You sit in meetings with adrenaline, you lie in bed with a racing heart, you walk through your day with tension locked in your shoulders. Movement gives your body a completion signal. It tells the brain the activation had a purpose and it ended. That reduces the sense of unfinished danger. But regulation isn't only about movement. It's also about how you handle activation in real time, especially when the sensations themselves are what you fear. If you've ever felt your heart jump and instantly thought, "What if this never stops?" That's the fear of sensation. If you've ever felt dizzy and thought, "What if I pass out?" That's the fear of sensation. If you've ever felt your throat tighten and thought, "What if I can't breathe?" That's the fear of sensation. The sensation isn't the problem. The interpretation is the problem, and the avoidance that follows keeps the interpretation stuck. So we add a new kind of training: intentional, controlled exposure to sensation, so your brain learns that sensations can be intense and still safe. This does not mean you do anything reckless. It means you choose safe, everyday ways to feel your body activate and then settle. A brisk walk that raises your heart rate then slows it down. Climbing stairs for a minute, then standing still and letting the breath normalize. Holding a plank, feeling the burn, then releasing. These are simple rehearsals that teach your brain the truth. Elevated sensations are not emergencies. They are signals. They come and go. When you do this, something shifts. You stop treating your body like a fragile machine that might break, and you start treating it like a capable system that can handle stress and return to baseline. Another regulation skill is how you breathe. Not dramatic breathing to force calm, not aggressive breath control that turns into another safety ritual. The goal is to breathe in a way that communicates steadiness. When anxiety rises, many people start gulping air, sighing repeatedly, or taking exaggerated deep breaths. The brain reads that as urgency. Instead, you practice a quiet breath with a longer exhale than inhale, gentle and normal, as if you were walking through a store or sitting with a friend. You are not trying to delete anxiety. You are refusing to behave like you are in danger. Then there's attention. Anxiety hijacks attention and traps it inside your body and into the future. Regulation includes training your attention to widen again, not with force but with repetition. When you notice you're scanning your sensations or running disaster scenarios, you return to what is real and observable. The weight of your feet, the sounds around you, the temperature of the air, the shape of objects in the room. The present moment isn't a spiritual concept here. It's a practical tool. The more attention stays anchored in the environment, the less fuel you feed to the internal alarm. Now let's talk about the part people resist: recovery. Many anxious people don't recover well. They rest, but their minds are still working. They sit, but their bodies are still bracing. They relax with stimulation that keeps the system activated. Recovery is not collapsing. Recovery is deliberate downshifting. This could look like an evening routine that signals closure. Lights lower, screens reduced, a warm shower, a short stretch, a book, a consistent bedtime. It could look like a quiet walk where you let your mind wander without grabbing your phone. It could look like sitting for 5 minutes and letting your jaw unclench and your shoulders drop, not to achieve a perfect calm, but to stop broadcasting emergency. And it could look like boundaries, because nervous systems don't recover well in lives without edges. If you say yes to everything, if you answer everyone instantly, if you never stop being reachable, you are telling your brain, "We live in constant demand." The alarm will act accordingly. Here's a tough point. Some of what you call anxiety is actually exhaustion. Some of what you call fear is actually overstimulation. Some of what you call a broken mind is a body that hasn't been given a stable rhythm in months or years. And because the body and brain are a single system, the fix is not only insight. It is training. But training does not mean controlling every variable. It means choosing a few high-leverage practices and doing them even when you don't feel like it. That's discipline. You don't need a complicated protocol. You need consistency. So choose a steadying baseline, something you can repeat. A reliable wake time most days. Movement most days, even if it's simple. Food that doesn't throw your body into crashes. A reduction in stimulants if they spike your system. A quiet downshift period at night. And one intentional practice each week where you let your body activate and then watch it settle, so your brain learns through experience. There's another benefit to this approach. It changes your identity. When you regulate your baseline and practice activation and recovery, you stop thinking of yourself as someone who must be protected from life. You start thinking of yourself as someone who can handle life. That identity shift is not motivational fluff. It is the deep rewiring of your alarm system. Because the alarm is always asking one question: can we handle what's coming? Every time you choose a steady breath instead of a dramatic one, you answer. Every time you move your body and let it come back down, you answer. Every time you recover deliberately instead of collapsing into stimulation, you answer. Every time you continue with your values while sensations rise and fall, you answer. You're not trying to eliminate activation. You're trying to teach your brain that activation is not danger. As this chapter closes, let the questions settle into you like a training plan, not a theory. What does your current rhythm teach your nervous system about the world? That it's a constant emergency, or that it's demanding but manageable? Where in your day do you unknowingly amplify activation with stimulation, skipping recovery, or treating every message like a fire? What is one simple baseline practice you can repeat daily that would give your system a steadier platform? And what is one controlled way you can let your body activate and then settle this week? So your brain learns through proof that sensations can rise without becoming a catastrophe. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. Chapter 5. The mindset that disarms fear. You've learned to recognize the alarm without treating it as a verdict, to see anxiety as prediction rather than prophecy, to spot the safety habits that keep the system sensitive, and to build steadiness through nervous system training. Now we step into the inner battleground where anxiety often wins, the meaning you assign to what you feel and what you think. Because the brain doesn't just react to events. It reacts to the story you believe you're living inside. Two people can walk into the same room and have completely different experiences. One feels curious. The other feels threatened. The room is the same. The difference is interpretation. Anxiety is not only the presence of fear. It's the presence of a certain kind of belief. That discomfort means danger, that uncertainty means loss, that feeling bad means something is wrong with you. Your brain is constantly assigning meaning. It sees a sensation and labels it. It sees a thought and treats it as important. It sees a memory and turns it into a warning. And the meaning you assign determines what you do next. That's why the most powerful long-term antidote to anxiety is not forcing calm. It's changing how you relate to your internal experience. Here, the disciplined truth. You are not required to obey every thought you have. A thought is not a command. A thought is not a fact. A thought is a mental event. Anxiety thrives when you fuse with thoughts, when you take them literally, when you treat them as urgent. It shrinks when you learn to see thoughts as noise the brain generates while trying to protect you. Imagine sitting by a river. Leaves float by on the surface. Some are pleasant, some are ugly. You don't jump in after every leaf and wrestle it. You sit on the bank and let them pass. Your thoughts are like that. Anxiety pulls you into the river. It says, grab that thought, solve it, prove it wrong. Make sure it can't hurt you. But the more you fight a thought, the more important it feels. The more you chase certainty, the less you trust yourself. So you build a new skill, diffusion. Diffusion means you separate yourself from thoughts. Instead of "I'm going to fail," you shift to "my mind is producing the thought that I'm going to fail." That tiny change creates distance. It reminds you that you have a mind, but you are not your mind. This matters because anxious thoughts are often not sophisticated. They're repetitive, dramatic, and absolute. Always, never, everyone will notice. I won't survive this. Something is wrong. The anxious brain speaks in extremes because extremes get attention. Your job is not to debate the thought into silence. Your job is to stop treating it like an emergency broadcast. A woman named Kavya learned this after years of social anxiety. She would walk into gatherings and instantly evaluate herself like a harsh judge. Am I awkward? Do I look nervous? What should I say? And then she would monitor every expression on every face, searching for signs of rejection. She wasn't just experiencing anxiety. She was living inside a courtroom, and her mind was the prosecutor. Her breakthrough began when she stopped trying to win the case. The next time she entered a gathering, she heard the familiar thought, "You don't belong here." Instead of arguing back with 1,000 reasons, she labeled it. There's the "you don't belong" story. She let it be present like background noise. Then she chose a value-based behavior. She asked one person a simple, genuine question about their life and listened. Her anxiety didn't vanish, but her focus shifted from self-protection to engagement. Over time, that shift rewired her experience. This is the core mindset: live by values, not by fear. Fear's goal is safety through control. Values' goal is meaning through action. Fear asks, "What if?" Values ask, "What matters?" Fear says, "Avoid discomfort." Values say, "Build a life you respect." When you act from fear, you shrink. When you act from values, you expand. And expansion is how anxiety loosens its grip. But acting from values does not mean ignoring fear. It means allowing fear to ride along while you drive. So you stop asking, "How do I get rid of anxiety?" And you start asking, "What would I do if anxiety was allowed to be here?" That question changes everything. It turns anxiety from a gatekeeper into a passenger. It breaks the belief that you must feel ready before you act. It teaches your brain that feelings can be present without controlling your behavior. Now, another mindset that disarms anxiety is acceptance, but not the misunderstood version. Acceptance is not liking anxiety. It is not surrendering to suffering. Acceptance is the refusal to waste your life arguing with reality. When anxiety shows up, it is already here. Fighting it is often like thrashing in quicksand. The thrashing feels like effort, but it makes you sink. Acceptance is lying back, spreading your weight, and moving deliberately. You stop feeding panic with resistance. You allow the sensations to exist. You allow the thoughts to chatter, and you keep your hands on the steering wheel of your behavior. This is where many people get stuck because they believe acceptance means losing control. The opposite is true. Acceptance is how you regain control where it matters. You stop trying to control internal weather and start controlling your actions. There is also a hidden arrogance in anxiety that you must confront. Anxiety often implies I must be able to predict and prevent all pain. I must guarantee outcomes. I must never be embarrassed. I must never be uncertain. That belief sounds responsible, but it is impossible. And because it's impossible, it traps you in endless preparation and avoidance. The antidote is humility in the best sense. I am a human living in uncertainty, and I can handle what comes. Handling what comes does not mean enjoying it. It means responding with strength. A man named Daniel struggled with performance anxiety in a way that looked like perfectionism. He would work late polishing details no one would notice. He would rehearse conversations. He would avoid submitting work until the last moment because submission meant exposure. Deep down, he didn't fear failure as much as he feared being seen as imperfect. His mindset shift began when he adopted a personal standard. I will be brave enough to be seen. He started turning in work when it was solid, not flawless. He stopped writing extra paragraphs to prevent possible criticism. He accepted that some people might misunderstand him. He didn't like it, but he could tolerate it. This tolerance is a superpower. The more you tolerate emotional discomfort, the less you fear it. The less you fear it, the less anxiety needs to protect you from it. Now let's talk about self-talk, because the voice you use with yourself can either calm the system or inflame it. Many anxious people speak to themselves like a drill sergeant who panics. Hurry, fix it, don't mess up, what's wrong with you? That voice does not create discipline, it creates threat. Disciplined self-talk is firm, not cruel. It doesn't beg, it doesn't catastrophize, it doesn't insult. It states reality and directs behavior. When anxiety hits, the inner voice becomes simple. This is uncomfortable. I can handle it. Keep moving. Or my mind is predicting danger. I will act on my plan anyway. Or I don't need certainty. I need courage. This kind of self-talk isn't affirmations. It's leadership. There's a final mindset shift you need. Stop measuring progress by how you feel in the moment. Measure progress by how you respond. Some days you will feel anxious. That does not mean you're back at the beginning. Your nervous system has momentum. Old patterns can flare. Your job is to respond with the new pattern again and again until it becomes your default. Progress is not a straight line. It is a training curve. You're building a new reflex. Feel the alarm, label the story, loosen the crutches, steady the body, choose the value. And one more thing, anxiety often feeds on isolation. When you believe your fear makes you defective, you hide. When you hide, your world shrinks. When your world shrinks, the alarm grows louder because it senses fragility. One of the strongest ways to disarm fear is to stop making it a private shame. That doesn't mean you tell everyone everything. It means you stop acting like your inner experience is proof that you're unworthy. It's proof that you're human. As this chapter ends, let the questions cut through the noise and point you back to strength. What thought do you most often treat as a fact? And how would your life change if you labeled it as simply a thought your mind produces? Where are you living by fear's rules instead of your values? And what is one value-based action you could take even with anxiety present? When discomfort rises, do you fight it like quicksand, Or can you practice acceptance and keep your behavior steady? And if your measure of progress became your response instead of your feelings, what would you do tomorrow that you keep postponing until you feel ready? If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Chapter 6. The life you build after anxiety loses its throne. You've moved from seeing anxiety as a misfiring alarm to understanding it as a prediction machine. Then you identified the safety habits that quietly keep it loud. You learned how to train your nervous system for steadiness and how to disarm fear by changing your relationship with thoughts and choosing values over avoidance. Now the final step is not another concept. It's a commitment. Because anxiety doesn't truly fade when you understand it. It fades when your daily life proves again and again that you are the kind of person who leads yourself. At some point you realize something that changes your posture in the world. Anxiety was never the main problem. The main problem was the throne you gave it. You gave it the right to decide where you go, what you attempt, what you say, who you become. You treated it like an authority instead of a sensation. And the moment you stop doing that, everything begins to reorder. This last chapter is about building a life where anxiety may still knock on the door, but it no longer has a key. A strong life is not a life with zero fear. A strong life is a life with structure, meaning, and forward motion. Anxiety thrives in vague, unmade decisions. It thrives in days with no edges, no anchors, no priorities, because an unstructured mind will fill empty space with threat. Anxiety also thrives in lives that are built around comfort as the highest value. Comfort sounds harmless, but when comfort becomes the goal, avoidance becomes the strategy. And avoidance is the fuel. So you replace comfort as the goal with capability as the goal. Capability is earned, it is built, it is proven. And the proof comes from action, not from arguing with your thoughts. You already know the mechanics. Now we turn them into a code you live by. First, you commit to baseline steadiness. Not perfection, not obsession, steadiness. You choose a sleep rhythm you protect most days. You choose movement you repeat most days. You choose meals that keep your body stable. You reduce inputs that spike your system when you know they do. You create an evening downshift so you stop dragging stress into sleep. This is not self-care as a luxury. This is nervous system leadership. You are building the platform from which you face life. Second, you commit to clean exposure as a lifestyle, not as a one-time challenge. The goal is not to hunt fear like a thrill seeker. The goal is to stop reorganizing your life around avoiding it. Clean exposure means you step into what matters and you drop the crutches that tell your brain you can't handle it. It means you stop trying to guarantee that you won't feel anxious before you act. It means you do the thing while anxious, and you let your brain collect new evidence. Third, you commit to values as your compass. Fear will always have suggestions. It will always propose a smaller life. Values propose a bigger life. Values are not vague slogans. Values are behaviors you can point to. Courage looks like sending the message you've been delaying. Integrity looks like speaking with clarity instead of hiding behind disclaimers. Connection looks like making eye contact and listening even while your body buzzes. Growth looks like submitting work when it's solid, not flawless. Health looks like moving your body and sleeping even when your mind wants to scroll. When you live by values, you stop negotiating with anxiety for permission. You move first. The permission comes later. Now there is a reality you must accept if you want freedom. Anxiety may return in waves, not because you failed, but because you're human. Stress, lack of sleep, big life changes, illness, loss, new responsibilities, these can all turn the volume up temporarily. The mistake is not feeling anxious. The mistake is concluding that anxiety means you're back to the beginning. When anxiety flares, you return to your fundamentals. You label the sensations. You label the story. You stop the safety behaviors from taking over. You steady your body. You choose the next value-based step. You keep moving. This is not dramatic. This is repetition. And repetition is what rewires your alarm. Aisha, who once stood in line scanning her body and gripping her water bottle like a shield, eventually noticed something surprising. One day she stood in a line and realized she hadn't checked her pulse once. It wasn't a heroic moment. It was quiet. And that's how real change often happens. Not with fireworks, but with a normal day that used to feel impossible. Samir, who once rehearsed and sought reassurance in meetings, eventually found himself pausing after he spoke without fear of silence. He didn't feel fearless. He felt grounded. His brain had learned that he didn't need to perform rituals to be safe. The alarm had lost authority. Mira, who once feared being exposed while speaking, began to treat the rush of adrenaline as a sign of importance, not danger. Her heart racing didn't mean she was failing. It meant she was doing something that mattered. She stopped apologizing for her physiology. She started leading. And Vikram, who once checked and researched symptoms compulsively, learned to live with reasonable uncertainty. He didn't become careless. He became free. He traded obsessive certainty for grounded responsibility. These are not different people than they were before. They are people with a different relationship to fear. They stopped treating anxiety as a warning that must be obeyed and started treating it as a feeling that can be carried. Now let's make it practical as you step out of this audiobook and into your life. You need a simple daily script for moments when anxiety rises. Not a mantra you repeat to feel better, but a sequence that keeps you aligned. You notice the alarm. You name the sensations precisely. You name the story your mind is telling. You loosen your jaw and drop your shoulders. You return to a normal breath. You choose one value-based action, even small, and you do it. Then you move on without post-mortem analysis. No 2-hour debrief. No searching for reassurance. No turning the moment into a case file. You live forward. That last part matters. Many people do something brave, then undo the benefit by obsessing afterward. They replay it, judge it, search for signs they failed. That rumination is a safety behavior in disguise. It tells the brain this was dangerous. We must analyze it. Instead, you train a different ending. I did it and I'm done. There is also a long-term principle you must adopt. The goal is not to never feel anxiety. The goal is to become someone who doesn't need it to disappear to live well. When that becomes your goal, anxiety loses leverage. It can scream and you can still act. It can surge and you can still choose. It can stay for a while and you can still build. And now comes the turning point that separates listeners who change from listeners who collect information. You must choose a standard. A standard is different from a wish. A standard is what you do even when you don't feel like it. A standard is how you behave when fear is loud. A standard is the proof you give your brain. Your standard might be, I do not avoid what matters, or I do not feed reassurance seeking, Or, I do not negotiate with anxious thoughts. Or, I do not sacrifice sleep and stability and then act surprised when my alarm blares. Or, I will practice one clean exposure each week until my world expands. Choose a standard and live it, because here is what is waiting on the other side. It's not constant calm, it's dignity. It's the ability to sit in a room with sensations in your chest and still speak with clarity. It's the ability to walk into uncertainty and still take the next step. It's the ability to feel fear and not interpret it as fragility. It's a life where your decisions come from your values, not your avoidance. You were never meant to live in a cage built from what if. You were meant to live in motion, with purpose, with courage that shows up more often than it doesn't. So when the alarm rings tomorrow, you remember what it is: a system doing its job imperfectly. You don't hate it. You don't beg it. You lead it. You train it. You give it proof. And over time, the brain learns the lesson it has been waiting for. We can handle this. As you close this audiobook, let these reflections land as a call to action, not as a gentle thought. What has anxiety been allowed to decide for you? And what decision are you taking back first? Which safety behavior will you stop treating as necessary so your brain can finally learn you are capable? What value will you commit to acting on even when your body feels activated? And if you measured your success by how consistently you lead yourself instead of how often you feel calm, what would your next week look like in real actions, real choices, real proof? If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this.